Good morning, Chuck. I want to ask you about the future of the Republican Party, if we can start there. You have two Republican senators, Bob Corker of Tennessee, Jeff Flake of Arizona. They were making headlines last week by publicly criticizing President Trump. I guess my question is, do you think other Republicans are going to follow their lead? I mean, I know they're not running for re-election, but it seems like they're out there on their own right now. What does this say about the grand old party today and where it's going?
Well, look, it's clearly in the midst of a civil war. There's clearly a realignment going on politically in this country. And I think we're just, in 50 years, we'll be able to explain this a lot better than we can right now. But the fact of the matter is, Steve Bannon, who was the president's chief strategist, one of his criticism, I think, is dead on accurate, which is the leadership of the Republican Party is out of touch with the grassroots of the Republican Party. And the fact of the matter is, that is true. The sets of expectations, whatever it is, that however you want to look at this, via specific issues or even in just mindset, there is a disconnect between the leadership on Capitol Hill and the rank and file. President Trump has the ear of the rank and file and the support of the rank and file in a way that the leadership doesn't. And so I think the leadership has just not been able to figure out how it lost touch with this group of voters. And right now, that group of voters is sticking by this president. And I think you have a bunch of Republicans who are planning on being on the ballot again, who see that reality and think, well, if I'm going to survive, I better stand with him, not stand against him. Look at the Jeff Flake example. Why is he not running, Keith? He put out that book, and his numbers in Arizona collapsed.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, speaking of Republicans, I mean, someone else critical of the president, we have our own Democratic Florida Congresswoman, Frederica Wilson. I mean, and as a result, she claims now to be receiving threats because she criticized the president over his remarks to the widow of the soldier killed in Niger. The president called her wacky and accused her of secretly listening to his conversation. What does this say to other members of Congress, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, who may want to challenge President Trump?
Now, I have to tell you, and look, members of the media experience this as well, which is when you're in the crosshairs of the president and he comes after you publicly, there is a group of supporters in social media who come to his, to sort of come to his aid and can get to the point of full-fledged harassment, death threats. Members of the media, I can tell you I've received them over the last 12 months. So there is a price to pay sometimes. And I can tell you, I've talked privately to members of Congress on the Republican side of the aisle who say that is a factor in whether they speak out, in that they believe this. If they thought speaking out would help, they would. But their argument is it actually emboldens the president and gets his supporters more with them. They don't think it does any good, and they point to the Jeff Flake example and say, what good has it done?
Yeah. Hey, I want to get your thoughts about something else, the release of the JFK files. Everybody's talking about this. You have 2,800 documents released on Thursday. We didn't get all the files. I guess the CIA and the FBI, they were concerned about national security. At least that's what we're hearing. But what are we learning? And I know it's early, but what are we learning from the files already released, and what could be so sensitive that there needs to be this delay, the 6-month delay, before we see what else investigators uncovered about the '63 assassination of Kennedy?
Well, Keith, I want to focus on the second part first. Talk about reinforcing the conspiracy. Well, withholding documents that the president promised was going to get sent out only feeds the conspiracy theorists on this. So, look, I think they've done nothing, I think, to clear this up. In fact, we're going to address this on Meet the Press. Believe it or not, 61% of Americans, this is one thing that crosses party lines. Majority of Republicans, majority of Democrats, majority of Clinton supporters, majority of Trump supporters believe that Lee Harvey Oswald did not act alone. So the fact of the matter is, the continued withholding of this information only feeds that. Now, look, I've spent a lot of time talking to folks that have been trying to go down this rabbit hole for years, and they will tell you the most logical reason why they believe the CIA is doing this, Keith, is they don't want to be exposed and being embarrassed at the fact that they had eyes on Oswald a lot longer than they have admitted, than they ever admitted to the Warren Commission. And that ultimately is why they're withholding these documents, to avoid that embarrassment.
Well, we're going to see. 6 months, I guess we'll have to wait for it, maybe longer, depending on how it all turns out.
Maybe longer. I doubt 6 months, Keith.